query performance tuning and troubleshooting in Windows Azure SQL Database. So before we get started, who here is familiar with Windows Azure SQL Database? A few of you? All right, who's thinking about going to Windows Azure SQL Database? Come on, the rest of the hands should go up. All right. Okay, so this is going to assume that you're familiar with query tuning and troubleshooting on-prem. So I'm assuming you're all SQL people because you're here, right? So a lot of these things still apply to on-prem, but this is specifically for Windows Azure SQL Database. So cloud query troubleshooting and query tuning, okay? So a quick introduction, well, we'll actually get to that. So what I want you guys to get out of this today is say, why are we query tuning in the cloud? Because a lot of the things you can hide on-prem by just throwing more hardware at it, right? Who's done that? Come on, don't be shy. Yep. So you just throw more hardware at it and you're ready to go, but you can't get away with that in the cloud. So query tuning in the cloud becomes much, much, much more important, right? And we're going to talk about how to do that. And then the tools that are available to you to query tune, right? On-prem we have things like Profiler and Trace and things like that. You don't have some of those in the cloud, right? So how do you query tune? How do you troubleshoot your queries and locks and deadlocks and things like that, right? And then we're going to look at some of the portal interfaces and kind of what you can get out of this. So this is the goal. Hopefully we'll get out of this. Now this is a 60-minute session, but this is a 75-minute deck. So we are going to try to get through all of this in 60 minutes. Okay. All right. So a little bit about me. So I'm where's my picture? There we go. So I'm a Windows Azure technical evangelist. I work for Microsoft out of Redmond. And first time to New Zealand, I got to tell you, this is awesome. I've enjoyed it here. This has been great. Until today when it rained. But being from Seattle, I looked out the window and went, okay, I'm used to this. Okay, so if you're familiar with the Pacific Northwest, it does that all the time anyway. All right. So why tune queries, right? Before we actually get into the why, I want to spend a couple minutes and talk about the architecture of Windows Azure SQL Database, because understanding how Windows Azure SQL Database works helps you understand where are my queries running, what's behind the scenes, what's the architecture, what's the physical architecture behind the box. So we're just going to spend just a couple minutes on this, right? And it's really not that different than on-prem. On-prem, there's the box, right? We can touch it, smell it, feel it. We name it things like, we give it instance names like Batman, Superman, Ratbert, Dilbert. And don't lie to me, you've all done that, right? So in Windows Azure SQL Database, you can't do that. And when I say can't, cannot do that, right? So this is the architecture. So the whole premise behind Windows Azure SQL Database is that we don't want is the client layer. We didn't want to make you learn a whole new set of technologies. So all the tools and technologies and ORMs and things like that still work, right? ADO.NET, ODBC, it still talks TDS, right? All that still works, right? The only difference is this services layer. And the services layer does provisioning, billing and metering, and connection routing. Okay? So provisioning, when I provision a database, so it is SQL Server behind the scenes, and that's the platform layer. It is running SQL Server, right? And there are boxes running instances of SQL Server, but when you provision a database, right, are all your databases going on the same box? No. I provision one database, and it's going to go one into the warehouse. I provision a second database, it may go on another box on another end of the warehouse, because when I provision a database, Windows Azure SQL Database goes, where's the least busy box currently to house this database? And really that database may not stay in that box, because the fabric down here may go, you know what, I'm going to get better performance for you by moving this database from this box to this box. So it may not stay there, but you don't care, right? Your connection still works, right? So provisioning. And then, right, but my box may be on the same database as your box, so we're going to talk about throttling and things like that, right? And why is that important? So provisioning, and for every database, you actually get how many databases? 3, right? 1 primary, 2 replica. So there's your high availability, free for the cost of that one, right? So provisioning, billing, and metering basically says how many databases you have, what's their size, so we can bill you appropriately. And then connection routing, right? So I'm not connecting to Ratbert or Dilbert or whatever my instance name is. My instance name is basically a TDS endpoint, and we'll actually see that in a second, right? Does that make sense? Right? You guys seen that? All right. But behind that is SQL Server, and your SQL Server, that's your box, but it's not your box. So when I provision a Windows Azure SQL Database server, I don't get a physical box. It assigns me a TDS endpoint, right? And my queries run against that. And so we're going to talk about distributed queries and why the things are running where they are, right? Just want to give you a quick foundation on what's the architecture, because it is the same except for that services layer, right? And we really don't need to think about that. What we need to be cognizant of is, yeah, this is happening, but we want to be cognizant of this SQL database fabric because we're actually going to talk about that in a second. Questions about that? All right. All right, so why do we tune queries? This should be pretty standard, right? It's not that, again, you can't hide bad performing queries. You can't hide bad SQL in Windows in the cloud, right? So you have no control over where your queries run, how many resources are given to that. And that actually now is technically not a true statement, right? It's true, but it's not true. And I'll tell you why, right? But right now, you have no control where your queries run, right? You can't say run it on this box. It's just your database is on that box. It's going to run there, right? Now, how many resources your query uses? Right now, this is a shared resources scenario. My database may go on the same box as your database. So we're all fighting for the same resources, correct? I don't want you robbing resources from me, and I know you don't want me robbing resources from you. But what did Microsoft announce in preview a couple of months ago? Premium, say that, yeah. Premium, what does premium give you? Dedicated resources. Just like you can in Windows Azure, right? So I can, or Windows Azure Virtual Machine, I can say give me dedicated resources, right? The reason we don't list it here is because it's in preview. So right now it's shared resources. Now you can still do shared resources when it comes out of preview, but you can now get dedicated resources. But you still may get throttled a little bit, right? But again, right now it's, right now it's shared resources. You don't dictate how many resources are given to you, right? You don't dictate how many CPUs and disks are dedicated to you except for premium. And at some point, you have no control over just at some point that server just goes, I'm done, right? And gives up the ghost, right? It happens, but not too frequently, right? Now, whether you like it or not, we get a lot of phone calls. Support gets a lot of phone calls going, my query's running bad. It ran great yesterday, right? Well, send us your code. 9 times out of 10, it's you. It's not us, right? So let's look at your code. And this is why we're here. Now, I'm not passing the buck. It's you're here because hey, just write good queries, right? It's these other people that we're really concerned about that don't know how to write good queries, right? So, but a lot of times it's when people call up, hey, my query's running bad. It's not performing. It's well, let's send us your code. And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it's hey, right? It's you. Okay. Now, what's the biggest database size in Windows Azure SQL Database right now? 150 gig. 150 gig. Right? Now there may be bigger database sizes, but right now this point is your query runs in many places, right? And that means, so everybody heard of sharding, database sharding, right? So there's a whole concept of partitioning your database across multiple independent nodes, okay? If you do that, your query is not going to run just in one place, right? And even if you have one database, it may run on that one server today, and again, SQL, Windows Azure may say, hey, I'm going to move my your database from here to get better performance, so it may, query may run in a different server tomorrow. You have no idea where your query is going to run and what the resources are on that box. Right? So we tune because we want the best performance. There's some things that are just out of our control, right? Right. So we need to tune. So given that, why are we using Windows Azure SQL Database? What are the benefits of Windows Azure SQL Database? Yeah, I can spin up a server. How long does it take you to provision a server on-prem? Yeah, I've heard anything from, someone said half hour. I'm like, you lie. There's no way, right? But anywhere from like a half a day, you got to provision it. If you have to order the box, holy cow, that could take, right? So it's getting from A to B, getting up and running is much shorter. Speed of delivery, low cost, right? I can spin up, it's elasticity. Let me use resources that I need and give them back. So just pay for the resources that I use, right? If I'm doing this on-prem, I can't give that box back when I'm done, right? I'm paying for that box from day one, okay? Cheaper prices, and then again, the expandable capacity. Let me scale up and scale down, the whole sharding. So there's definite benefits and obvious benefits of using Windows Azure SQL Database, right? It's, okay, let's get the best performance out of that database, okay? So what's old is new. So again, there used to be a time when we really had to focus on these things, right? Transactions, tune the queries, only move your data when you need it, right? We didn't care. But as RAM got cheaper and as hard drives got cheaper and as boxes got cheaper and performance increased, the I don't care went up, right? And so now we're going back. We're full circle because now the whole thing's going to the cloud. The movement is to the cloud, and now these things are important again, right? So keep the transactions as short as possible. Only move the data when you need to move it, and only move the data when you need to move it, and only move the data that you need to move. The fourth bullet point is the most important, right? Tune the queries. Do you guys know that if you went to your boss today on-prem and said, I can save you money tuning this query, what would your boss say? Pfft, really? Most people's like, I don't care, I just want my report, right? But if you can go to your boss, because you can literally, the fourth bullet point, you can literally save money, cash, by tuning your queries in the cloud, right? Why? Resources, maybe the amount of data you're pulling down might change, might be less, executes faster, right? You can literally save money by tuning your queries in the cloud, right? And so at the cost of things, you go to your boss and you tell him that, he's like, yeah, absolutely, like this guy said. Hey, have at it, right? Because I don't want to pay more than I need to. So you can actually save money by tuning your queries in the cloud. Next bullet point, connectivity. Why is connectivity important when we're talking about tuning queries? This is a tough one. Why is it important? Yep, say that again a little louder.
Distributed queries may be more relevant than a directed query if you've got better network.
That's part of it. A lot of it has to do with some of these, right? So when I execute a query, right, I want that query to execute as soon as possible. But from a connectivity standpoint, now we're just not connected wire to our box, right? Our box is now in the cloud, and we have no control over whether that server goes down, whether maybe our internet service provider just gave up the ghost or is having connectivity issues, right? So let's say, for example, I'm in the middle of running a query, right? And I just pulled down all this data, right? And that's just for argument's sake, it's a poor performing query, so it's taking a while to execute, right? So it's pulling down all this data. And what happens when data leaves the data center? You get charged for that, right? So I'm executing this query, there's queries coming down, and all of a sudden what happens? The internet goes down for whatever reason, right? So now you're like, crap. So you have to execute that query again when the internet comes up. So now you're getting charged twice for that same query. Okay? So you want that query to execute as fast as possible and as quick and as efficient as possible. Only pull down the query, the data that you need to and when you need it. Right? So from a connectivity standpoint, there's things that you have no control over, like we saw earlier. You have no control over certain things. So you want that query to execute as soon as possible because something may happen that you have no control over from a connectivity standpoint. For example, right, Windows Azure SQL database errors, right? Anybody heard of the transient fault handling application block in the Microsoft Enterprise Library? Come on, 1, 2, 3, right? You guys heard of the Enterprise Library, right? Okay. Anybody try to build a retry into their application without the Enterprise Library? Anybody? How painful was that? Very, right? How easy it is to use with the Windows the transient fault handling application block. There's got to be an acronym for that I'm missing, right? Anybody know how easy to do? One line of code. One line of code to define my retry policy that says how many times do I retry and what's my wait between retries. And then it's just a wrapper around the SQL connection class. So I apply that policy to my SQL connection. It's called the reliable SQL connection class. Apply that and it filters down the connection. And so what it does is when you get one of these, right, it retries. It'll wait and retry again and wait and retry again. So these are certain things that you have that's from a best practice standpoint that says, let me do this so that I can limit the amount of data that I'm pulling down or that I'm not crashing and I just retry, which means don't start over, pick up and do it again, right? So important information. So Windows Azure SQL database errors, general errors, someone pulled the plug out, their service provider went down, right? You want your queries, and hopefully this is making sense, you want your queries to execute as fast as possible so that you can eliminate some of these issues. And that if they do happen, you're keeping the cost down as much as possible. Make sense? Okay? So this is why we're talking connectivity, right? Throttling. This is another one. Who's heard of Windows Azure SQL database throttling? Anybody? One? Couple of you? Yeah, okay, Ryan, yes. All right. I thought that was you back there. All right, so there's two types of throttling. There's soft throttling and hard throttling. And that's that, remember that in the architecture slide there was that agent? His job is to make sure that if we're in a shared environment, that we all play nice together, right? Because I don't want you robbing critical resources for me, and I know you don't want me robbing critical resources for you. So if it deems that you're doing something not normal, it may throttle you, and there's soft throttling and hard throttling. And it could be anywhere from, hey, we're going to scale the number of connections that you can make to this server back, right? To, dude, you're just out of line, and we are going to kill all your connections and prevent you from connecting for like 30 seconds or something like that, right? Now, don't let me scare you, because you really got to be doing something really, really, really stupid to get throttled, okay? I mean, you got to really be pushing it. But it can happen, and you need to be aware of that you could get throttled. And there's two DMVs, system.event log and system.database connection stats, where you can look at, and we'll actually see these and say, yep, I was throttled, or what connections were throttled and why they were throttled, right? And you can actually tell in the retry policy, there's certain codes that will come back and say why you were throttled and what was the result of your throttling, okay? That's there. But please use that, right? Because you don't want to get throttled. And if you are, this is why, again, your poor performing queries could result in being throttled. Right? If you're just hammering and hammering and hammering, right? So again, you don't want that. And which again is going to cost you money, because you have to execute the query again, right? Does it make sense? So again, this is important. So connection and throttling, these are two things you have to keep in mind when you're writing your queries, okay? So let's jump out and let's take a quick look at throttling, right? And there's two, what we're going to do here is, so I've connected to my, open this one, master. Okay, and there's another file. This is going to connect me to my master database. I want another file, and that's going to, I want this one. This one's going to come in later. I'm actually going to use that one later. Okay, so system event log. Let's take a quick look at that. Can you guys see that? Come on. I'm trying to bring that up. Oh, there it is. All right, so look, you can actually look at that. So there's the database name, the start time, the end time, the description, right? So from the event log, you can scroll over here and say, from the description, it will actually say, did I connect? Was my connections? And if it was throttled, it would say block. Like you can see there, blocked by firewall, connection successful. So from a connection standpoint, this is a great DMV to go, hey, what's going on in my database? Quick snapshot, right? But in here also, you can look to say what's going on from connections. Why was and why was my connection rejected, or was it successful? Things like that, right? So this is a quick snapshot into what's going on in my database, or in my database and on my server, on that physical server. Okay, so quick snapshot. You guys are aware of this one, right? And then there's the other one. If we want to get even more, let's narrow it down, because here this will also tell us. It's the same thing, really. But this will tell us, was my connection throttled? And if so, why was it throttled? So this is a great place to go look to see what's going on in my database, in my server, because you notice I got multiple databases here. So what's going on in my server, and was a connection throttled, right? And why was it throttled? Make sense? So this is a great query, and there's one more down here, I think, right? And then from a sys.database connection stats, right? So here is more additional throttling information, right? So there's the database name, the start time, the end time, access counts. So how many connections were successful? How many were failed? Connection failure count, terminated connection count, right? What's going on? Did we have to terminate connections because, hey, you were throttled? Things like that. But the more important thing over on the end here is, oops, let me scroll over. Oh, yeah, throttled connection count, that one. So if you want to know what's going on with the connection and if any connections were throttled, this is where you look. Okay? Because in the portal, we're not going to tell you. We're just, the portal's got that little quick graph. We're not going to tell you, hey, you've got throttled connections. I mean, we'll look at some stuff. But if you want to know what's going on here, this is a great place to start. What is going on? So you can tell, again, especially if someone's trying to spoof in and start trying to connect to your databases. So from failed connections to successful connections to throttled connections to, hey, what's going on in my server and all the databases, those two DMVs right there are your best friend. Start there, right? Okay. Any questions about that? real quick. All right, so let's move on. And again, I like this interactive, so you've got questions, just interrupt and let's make this fun. All right, let's keep going. Tools. All right, so there's a number of tools. So you're all familiar with Windows Azure, SQL Server Management Studio, hopefully. If you're not, you're in the wrong room. Okay, so there's a number of tools that we want to talk about here as to how you can work with and looking at your queries, right? SQL Server Management Studio, obviously, and we'll probably just take maybe a 10-second look at that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because you're all familiar with that, right? But there is the SQL Database Management Portal and then the DMVs, right? So we are going to take a look at those. Who is familiar with SQL Database Management Portal? I'm not talking the Windows Azure Management Portal, the SQL Database Management Portal. 1.5. All right, so just a couple of you, right? All right. We'll actually get to that, and then the DMVs. Okay, we'll talk about a lot of the DMVs because the DMVs is where these need to be. If you got a tool belt of utilities that you need to help you debug SQL Server, the DMVs need to be number one in your tool belt. Right, these are your best friends. All right, so SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, you guys know this. You're familiar with this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It does, obviously you got to have a connection. It does your statistics, your Object Explorer, your statistics time and I/O, execution plans. What doesn't it do? Anybody? What? Huh? Traces and profiling, right? The two tools that you, as a query guy, are going to go, crap, where are they, right? Two important tools, right? So this is why the DMVs, we're going to look at the DMVs, okay? But they don't do that. Right now, no tracing and no profiling, right? So I'm actually going to jump in there, but I'm going to skip the demo real quick because we'll actually do one big demo, right? All right, the SQL Database Management Portal. Who here has ever wished there was a, we'll call it a web-based version of SQL Server Management Studio? Oh, really? The rest of you are just lying, seriously. Really? No one's ever wished that? Come on. All right, so the SQL Database Management Portal is a web, and it's not a full-blown, so I don't want it to lead you astray, right? But it does do a lot of things of SQL Server Management Studio does. But it doesn't do things like security, like you can't create logins and users and do groups and permissions and things like that. But if you're working with objects, and more importantly, if you want to look at execution plans, this is your place to go. Okay, and we'll actually jump out and do that, right? So you can monitor, you can do execution plans. Again, it's got a query window. So a lot of the stuff that SQL Server Management Studio does from a object standpoint still works. But again, no users, no security, no roles, things like that, right? And it actually is federation, scalability aware. So if you have multiple federations, man, it's awesome. Okay, you can actually scale those out from that portal. Okay. And then the portal monitor. This is the Windows Azure SQL Database or the Windows Azure Management Portal. You go in there and just look to see what's going on. And we'll actually look at all of these, okay? So with that, so again, from the portal monitor, you can look at query performance, kind of what's going on. Some of these are cache dependent, so a lot of these DMVs are cache dependent. We'll actually look at this. We'll see this in a second. Okay, so let's jump out and we'll do some, let's do some queries. Actually, let's come back to that because I want to look at the actual query window, right? The query window within the SQL Database Management Portal is much the same as SQL Server Management Studio, right? But you don't have drag and drop. There's no code completion, so whatever dot, you don't have that code completion. But I mean, how many of us use that here, really, right? Some of us do, most of us, a lot of us don't, right? So there's no properties, so you can't set statistics, things like that. But you do get your plan. So it is V1, but it's a very good V1, right? And I'm going to call it a very good V1. So with that, let's just jump out and just do a bunch of these queries all at once, okay? And then we're going to jump out and look at some execution plans. All right. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, so here's what I've done is I've logged into my SQL Server Management Portal. You notice that I've got, I don't need this anymore. But really, I've connected to my Windows Azure SQL Database server, and so there's all my objects. And all right, so I've got my execution plans. I can look at I can parse my query, look at display execution plans. I can look at include actual execution plans. You guys are familiar with this, so this is about all I'm going to cover here, right? You guys are familiar with this, correct? Okay. So what I want to do here now is let's get into the stuff that's to me is exciting. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the portal here, and I'm going to go to a server. And let's just pick, I'm going to pick my West US, right? And I can go to the dashboard. And the dashboard right here gives me an overall usage overview, right? When it comes up, right? Come on. So you've seen that, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time here. So you've seen that graph, right? How many connections? You've all seen that graph. It should come up, right? But it lists my databases. I can go and configure stuff. I can go into the history. But what I want to do is go to the dashboard should pull up. Actually, let's go into a database. Let's pick that one. That's what I want, right? So I can go to the dashboard here and look at, sorry, I went to the wrong place. So I can look at deadlocks, successful connections, and failed connections. Right, I can see how many days, what's my database size here. If I go to monitor, right, I really get kind of the same thing, but I actually get a little more information, right? So if you want just a quick snapshot on what's going on in your database from connections and throttling, right, go here, okay? Not anything exciting, but it's a great place, a great snapshot, okay? And really this pulls from the DMVs as well. But what I really want to show you is if I go back to, let's go back, I'm sorry, to here and go to dashboard. Right? There's a little link on here called Manage URL. Right? What does this open for me? It opens the SQL Database Management Portal. Right? For this, again, this specific database. I could go back to the server and do the same thing. Right? So what I'm going to do is let me just log in here. Whoop. Make sure I log in here. Hopefully this will be correct. All right. And while that's coming up, let me just look at one other thing. Can we go? Okay. Let me jump into this because actually we're going to spend just a bunch of time right here. So when I go into execution plans in the portal query window, let's look at execution plans because again, I'm not talking about SQL Server Management Studio. I'm talking about the SQL Database Management Portal. They are much graphical, and I think to me, now you guys may disagree, and that's totally okay, but to me, the SQL Database Management Portal gives me a much better graphical user experience than SQL Server Management Studio, and I'll show you why, right? It's much more pleasant UI, right? And we'll see this in the demo. You can actually save the query plans, right, and actually open them up in SQL Server Management Studio. You have properties, and you actually have highlighting. So I'm going to show you this, and I want your feedback. Tell me if well, that just totally sucks, right, or blows. Or just say, that was awesome. Greatest thing since sliced bread, right? Be honest. So as we go through this, because I think this is, from a developer standpoint, those that tune queries, I want to know, hey, where's all my seeks going? You know, where are my problem properties in my execution plan? And instead of having to highlight and things like that, I think this is a much more interesting tool to allow me to tune queries. All right, so let's jump out and let's look at this. So hopefully it should have opened. All right, so there I am. Right, so I can do a new query. I can do, there's my database. I got an overview. All right, so there's what's going on in this database from an administration standpoint. I can do a new query. I can refresh. I can actually do a new, if I want to do new federation type of thing. If I want to design, go down to design. I can do a new table, store procedure, view. I can edit, update. I can insert data. I can do all of this through this tool. Right. So let's go do a new query. And what I want to do is I'm going to actually go back to this query here. And I'm going to grab, that's another, you guys see this. There's nothing out of the ordinary in this query, right? Standard, AdventureWorks, I'm going to query, a couple joins, right? Okay. So if I were to do, let me take that query, copy that. Let me go to my portal. Let me paste that here. Did I not copy it? Try that again. Control-C. There we go. All right. So let me highlight that. Let me look at the actual execution plan. Okay. So there's my query plan. Okay. Can I see that? Okay. Now, initially you're going, hey, that's not too impressive, right? However, can you do this in SQL Server Management Studio? Ooh. I'm going the wrong way. Can you do that? Okay. Can I look at these properties in terms of total or CPU or I/O? Right? Yeah. People are going, hey. Yeah. Right. So that's awesome. Now it just gets even better because I can say, hey, so down in this left section down here, right? I can go, well, I want to know everything. Show me all my scans. Click. Oh, I have no scans, right? But show me maybe all my merge joins, what I got. So I can highlight and say, show me all my properties that are causing me problems, for example. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. So let me scroll over here. Keep going. So let me, can I scroll over here? Yep, there it is. So let me show me all my nested loops, right? And they highlight some blue. So now, again, in this query, there's only a few properties, right? But if I've got a query that's, and we've seen some queries that are probably nested pretty deep and you don't want to have to look at any of these, this will save you time. And this to me is very cool because I can go show me my nested loops, show me my sorts, show me my merge joins, or show me my scans, right? And I don't have too many of those, right? But I can easily and quickly highlight, right, some of these things, like show me all my seeks, right? And it'll highlight those blue for me, and I don't have to go hover each one. So from a time savings perspective, this is awesome, right? Now from a zoom perspective, so it's also, I can look at properties, I can highlight, I can click once and say, hey, just a quick click, and show me information right there, right? And if I go into view more, right, there's additional information. So I get the same information that I can through SQL Server Management Studio, but I have the ability to sort all of this by total, by CPU, right? I get additional information, much more information than I would get out of SQL Server Management Studio, right? Now it gets even better, right? Because I can actually, if I click in here and do save as, and say SQL plan file, I'm going to save this to, let's just call it, I'm going to do dtemp and call it NG demo plan. Okay. So I can now go back to SQL Server Management Studio, open, let's go to dtemp. Where's NC demo plan? Bam. Okay. So I can actually take that plan. These plans can go back from SQL Server Management Studio to the data management portal and vice versa, right? So this is really cool. Now, again, you may not be going, hey, this may not be too exciting, but to me, this gives me, I find myself in here more now because I can look and say, I want specific information. Just don't show me this, right? I can highlight over it, yeah, but I can't say, hey, show me all my seeks, show me all my merge joins, show me all my, right? That kind of thing, and I can't zoom in and out. I can't I can't sort by I/O or CPU or things like that here. So I find myself now here in SQL Server Management Studio. Thoughts? Yeah, you like that? Yeah, woo. Okay. Okay. Yes. This is only SQL. Yeah, SQL. We'll call it SQL Azure because it's easier to say. Okay. All right. But you heard me say Windows Azure SQL Database just for the record. SQL, but it's SQL Azure. Okay? All right, any other questions? So again, I think this is a cool tool. All right. So you guys want so any questions about the SQL Database Management Portal? All right, I think this is a good place to again do queries and manage your databases. All right, let's go back to the slides. Yeah, that's kind of what he asked, right? And I'm sorry, I should repeat the questions because this is a wide room. So yeah, he kind of asked the same question. Is this available SQL Server Management Studio? And right now, no. Not that I know of. Not that I know of. But you know what? I'll find out. But right now, Microsoft's, Ryan can attest, it's cloud first, right? So they're going to do this, and at some point, I'm sure it's on the radar, on the roadmap. But where on the roadmap and where on the radar, it's right. So yeah, this would be cool. But again, cloud. Hey, okay. Let's keep going.
So in theory, then, would you be able to save a execution plane from XSMS and then upload it into another instance you had in the cloud to view it there?
So theoretically, yeah. So because it is SQL Server, right? So the question was, can I take an on-prem execution plan and upload it to? Let's see. So I said I was thinking yes, but I'm gonna say I haven't tried that, and I'm gonna say no, and let me show you why. Because in Windows Azure SQL Data, you want to open up Windows Azure SQL Database, correct? So you know what? I want to say yeah. I'm going to say I'm going back and forth because I keep thinking of stuff. Okay, so you know if I can connect to this, and there's my database, right? I should just be able to go open and open it. It's just in SQL Server Management Studio, and then
I'm talking about, let's say you've got an on-premise database.
Right.
Right, and you've got an execution plan that's just doing your header, right?
Yep.
And you don't have a copy of it in your current cloud solution, but you do have other databases up there. Could you theoretically import it into your...
Well, so you can't import a plan.
Or can you only, the saved execution plan? Or are you only able to view stuff that's actually been saved from a database that's already up in the cloud?
Well, I'm still not quite sure I understand your question, because you're saying I've got a database and I create an execution plan off like we did here, right? But let's say I did it on-prem. I want to take that and I want to open it up in the cloud. Huh?
Just the execution plan.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I don't know. Part of me says I want to say no, because you know it's just. I mean, I can open it like you saw here. If I were to create this, it's like I'm connected to Windows Azure SQL Database, right? It doesn't matter if I create an execution plan from this database on-prem, right? I'm still connected to Windows Azure SQL Database, so I don't see what the benefit is of me just opening up the plan connected to the cloud. Huh? Open the portal? Yeah. That's what I said earlier, right? So I could be able to, create a plan here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then open it here. Right? Open. Yeah, and that's what I said earlier. You should. Yeah. So sorry, I apologize. I misunderstood. So you can go both. You can go both directions. I think I said that earlier. You can go from plan to cloud, cloud to on-prem. Right? Either way. But you don't get. Thank you. You don't get the cool coloring. Either way, just here, right? Well, that's not true too. So I would venture to guess that if you opened a plan in here, it would pick up those things, right? So yes, yeah.
Will the web portal suggest indexes like Management Studio does?
No, so this does not do index. So again, kind of V1 doesn't do index hints, right? It just looks at. You can look at the plan, but you can't say it's not going to look at that query and say I'm going to suggest this hint or this index hint, right? All right, yeah, good questions. Thank you. All right, let's keep going because we got a little bit more time left. All right, you saw that demo. Okay, DMO. Right, these are your database management objects. These are your things that, again, things that you need to have at your ready to be able to troubleshoot queries, right? But there are some differences between DMOs that you run on-prem and DMOs that you run on the cloud, right? Obviously, so you can't, and why is that? What would the major differences be? Do you have access to the physical box or the entire instance in the cloud? Right, so things like, reboot, restart, anything that's system level, you don't have access to, right? But anything that's scoped at the database level, absolutely, right? But things that are scoped at the system level, you do not have access to, okay? So like no reboot, no restart, attach, detach, things like that, you don't have access to, right? Any information about the operating system, you just don't have access to, right? We're only exposing things that give you insight and information into that database that you're specifically working with, right? Make sense? Because we're not going to give you access to the box. You don't have access to the box, okay? And then, again, in this case, no clickable execution plans. But we saw that you can go in there and load the execution plan and look to see what's going on, right? So that's still pretty cool. Okay, wait state monitoring. Okay. Again, these are all DMOs and DMVs. These are the things you need to look at to go, hey, right, what's going on? Okay. So wait states, DM exec requests, that does show wait states. If you want to know what's being, what queries are kind of in a holding pattern, there you go. Okay. DM wait stats. okay, or sorry, DM exec requests, what queries are currently in the cache, getting ready to be executed. DM wait stats, these are, okay, what's being, what kind of problems am I currently having in my database, right? You guys familiar with these DMVs, right? So these are two to go on, hey, what's going on with my queries, what's currently being executed, what's in the cache waiting to be executed, and why am I getting deadlocks, things like that, right? These are two good DMVs, okay? Now, there are special wait types. There's the REPL slow secondary throttle and REPL commit acknowledgement. Do you find these on-prem? No. Why not? What's that? We're not replicating, but these are being used. What are they being used for? How many databases do I have when I create a database? How many databases do I get? 3. And they're always in sync, right? So data is being, we'll call it replicated or synchronized between databases. And these two special wait types you will see in DB wait stats because what's going on with the replication or the synchronization of my data between my primary and my replicas, right? So if you were to look in DB wait stats and you see these new wait types, you know that the synchronization is going on between your primary and replicas, right? And if there's any waits going on and things like that, right? So again, good to know if you're looking at this and going, hey, what are these two new things, right? So again, expected wait types. What's resource semaphore? So you got resource semaphore, IO latch, and schedule yield. What are these two? Or sorry, what are these 3? Memory, CPU, and IO. I'm sorry, not in that order, but these, right? So these are the kind of ones when you're looking at these wait stats, you look at these and go, if you see a lot of these, all right, what's going on? Make sense? Okay, so let's take a look. And what I'm going to do is I actually have. I ran this earlier, so I've got this PowerShell. I should have started this earlier, but I'm going to start it right now. So this is just a simple PowerShell that's going to cost Microsoft money, in essence, because it's just going to do a bunch of queries and things like that and pull down data. Okay, so I'm going to run this. Right, we're not going to look at this. We're going to kick it off, and it's just going to start running queries because a lot of the DMVs that we're going to look at are going to be pulling off this data that we're running here. Okay, come on. Go. Waiting. I want to make sure it kicks off. There we go. Okay, so we're going to minimize this. All right, so with that, let's go. Let's jump back here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, and what I'm going to do is system DB wait stats. Okay, let's take a look at that one. Oops, I do need to be in my AdventureWorks database. Okay, so we're running DB wait stats, right? And what do we see here? So again, this is a good, so we don't see anything out of the ordinary. We do see the async network I/O. We do see write log. There's our REPL commit acknowledgement and REPL commit turn. So we know that there's some synchronization going on. So again, hey, we know that these are two new ones that you want to keep in mind. Don't go, hey, what are those, right? But there's my async. So we know that some network traffic's going on. So we don't see a lot of high volume here, right? But again, this is a good way to go, waiting task count, wait time milliseconds, max wait time milliseconds. So if there's any locking and contention going on, this is a great place. This is the first place you need to go look, right, from a query perspective, right? So what's going on? Start here, okay? All right. Now, let's, any questions about that? Let's keep going. Let's look at, we just did wait state monitoring. All right, query DMOs. Okay, so 5 important DMOs, right, that another set of DMOs that you need to be cognizant about. Does anybody use these? SysDM exec requests, SysDM exec query stats, exec SQL text, exec query plan, and exec query plan text. Anybody familiar with these? Right? So, all right, if you are, what's exec requests? Yeah, queries that are currently running on your database. Okay? If you want to know what's going on and who's running queries, run that DMV. Okay? What's exec query stats? These are queries that are currently in cache, right? When you run a query, it gets sent to cache because it may use that again, And the optimizer may pull that out and go, okay, I'm going to run this query, right? That's kind of a 10,000, 50,000 foot view, right? So it's going to go into cache. And cache is volatile, by the way, right? So, because it may garbage collection out of, your query may garbage collection out of cache if it's not being used a lot, right? So this isn't going to show all because, for example, it's going to show all your queries in cache, and these are aggregated over the number of executions that have not been, or that have executed while they're currently in cache. And we'll actually show a demo of this in a second, right? So your queries in cache, it's going to show all the queries in cache that have been executed, aggregated and executed while that query is in cache. Okay, that makes sense? What's exec SQL text? If you want to look at what the text of the query that got executed, you look at that. Exec query plan, there's your query plan. Okay, DM exec query plan text, what's that? Your query plan is stored in XML. Right? So if I want to pull that in plain text, that's my DMV. Right? And what that allows me to do is say, if I run a query against this DMV, I can actually now look into this query plan text for specific instances of, hey, did it get garbage collectioned out, or certain scenarios. I can look for specific scenarios in that DMV. Right? What happened to that query? And I'll show you an example of that. Okay? All right. Let's jump out. So this thing should still be running, right? And I ran this a bunch today, so we should have a bunch of information. So let's go back to SQL Server Management Studio, and let's look at what queries are running now. Right? Now, that can't be correct, right? Why? Yes, and plus these are getting cached out, right? So yeah, so I got multiple processes, but this should show me all the queries that are currently running, right? So if I were to refresh this, this would change, right? And this has been running for a long time, so it actually should show more than this. But the key here is that the cache is volatile, okay? And again, this is a very simple example, right? So if you've got multiple users, many users hitting this database, right? You should have just loads and loads and loads and loads of records in here. And you should be able to look at this and go, hey, what's the start time? What's my SQL handle? What's my statement, start effect, start offset? What's my database? So there's just a lot of information. I could scroll over and look at, where's the important stuff? Right there. Is there a lock? Is there a deadlock? What's going on with those queries, right? Now, again, this is stuff that's currently executing right now. So, hey, is there a problem with this query? Right, so that's issue number one. All right, so let's look at what is currently running in cache. We may get more information out of this one. There you go. Okay, this is good information, right? So start out a lot of the good information, but you see what is currently in cache waiting to get executed. Okay, so there's creation time, last execution time. Now, I've been running this, I ran this a bunch of times, and it's saying that this query has been executed how many times? 232 times. I've run this probably for several hours, right? And I know this query is run more than 232 times, right? Why is it only showing 232 times? What is it? So the cache shows what? This query, so what did we run? Let's pull that back down. We ran the exec query stats, okay? That shows things that are in cache aggregated, right? Based on based on the query that's been executed from cache. So those numbers will not be correct. But what does this tell you? What information can you glean from this? I'm sorry? Yeah, so hey, what queries are being run and what queries are being run the most? What queries are giving me, right? And I can still look at this and say, min worker time, last worker time. I can look at this information and say, there's my physical reads. This is the information that Profiler pulls up anyway, right? So I get much better and granular information here. I'd say max physical reads. This right here will tell me, right, total CLR time, last elapsed time, what's going on. There's the query hash, query plan hash. We can actually look at this statement too, right? So from here, we can look and say, this is in cache, this has been running, and how many times is it really kind of has it run? And what can I do with this, right? So I know that these, if I were to execute this again, right, 412 times. I know in the last time it's been running more than, 40 times since I've been speaking, right? So good information, right? All right, let's look at a little more. All right, so instead of looking at all this information, we can go, hey, let's put some of these queries together and get much more detailed and granular information. So let me just show you this. And if you guys want this code, let me know. Happy to send it to you. All right, so let's look at this. Basically, what I'm doing is joining on exec query stats, show me the query plan, and show me the query plan text. Right? So I can join some of these DMVs and say, what's going on? What queries are really giving me the most problems? Okay, so let's look at that. All right, now there's my queries, and there's really this is the biggest query that's giving me problems. Right? Or this is the query that's been executed the most. So if I need to start debugging, where do I start? Right there. Right there. Okay? Questions? All right. Let's get even a little better, because remember we said, let's get a little deeper. Right? I want to show, so this is just as simple as that we may not get any records returned here, but we basically have the same type of query. What it's showing is it's saying, hey, show me, then this is where we can look at that query and say, return me records that show me specific problems or have issues. So here's a query, and give me everything where the statement has a statement option early abort reason. So equals timeout. So any queries that timed out while they were in cache. So basically this says, is there any queries that was in cache that timed out waiting for an execution plan? Right? Show me those. Because at that point, those queries are like, okay, this is a problem query. It was in cache, couldn't find a plan, so it got out, right? So we may not find anything in there, but this is a great way to say, hey, do I have any problems with this? So if I execute this, we may not get anything. Nope, nothing, right? But there are certain, up on MSDN, you can find things that you can search for as far as, show me queries that, have X, Y, and Z, right, for example. This one just says, show me any queries that are timing out while they're in the cache. Right? That tells me that that's a query, that's a problem query, and I need to do something with it. I need to deal with it. Right? Okay. Okay. Any questions about this? We good so far? Excellent. Okay. All right. Let's talk about indexes. All right. We just did DMOs. All right. Index DMOs. All right. So we've got DB index operational stats, DB index physical stats, and DB index usage stats. Anybody know what those three do? So the DB index operational stats shows you stuff that's occurring on your indexes currently, on the fly. So if there's an index that's being accessed right now, it'll be listed in this DMV, right? DB index physical stats shows me the distribution of indexes, right? The DB index usage stats shows me how many times the index have been accessed and how many times those indexes have been scanned. Is that critical information to have? Absolutely it is, right? In fact, the first two, the first 1 and 3, right? Show me what indexes are currently being used, and then if I want to know how many times those indexes are being hit, then let me look at issue number 3, right? Because this will tell me a lot of information about, do I need more indexes, or do I need to modify a current index, right? And how can I improve the query performance based on these indexes? Okay, so with that, let's jump out and look at some of the index DMOs. So that, what's the lifetime of the stats? It's garbage collectioned out pretty quick. I can't remember the exact time. The question was, what's the lifetime of the stats? How long does it keep that? Yeah. I think it's actually here. I think it's different. It's not the restart of the server, right? On-prem, it's the restart of the server, but here it's not because it's obviously you don't have access to. You'd be looking at other stuff. So I think it's give it X amount of days, right? Huh? Well, so there is. I think it's Could be database restart, yeah, database move. Well, yeah, so if you don't move the database is what I'm saying. If you don't move the database, it does keep it around for X amount of days. But if you do move that database, it will clean that out as well. And that's a good point, thank you. Because it's not, if you don't move that database, because we don't know and we can't control how, when that database is moved. So it's not going to keep that around forever because, of the space reasons. So I think it's every 3 or 4 days or something like that. I'll get an exact number. But it's either that because we're going to clean it out or when you move the database, either, whichever comes first, right? All right, so let's look at indexes. Let's do AdventureWorks 2012. I think this should give us something. Bam. All right. So based on, this is the one that's telling me, this is operational stats. And so tell me right now, hey, these are the indexes that are currently being used basically to run on all those queries that are being run. Right? So I can say, oh, this is being accessed quite a bit. So, right? Actually, this is not. I think this is just a list of indexes because I know in the queries I'm not hitting address and employee, right? But what this does give me, if you guys want to see that, right? It's basically, hey, show me the latch count weight. So are there any latches? Or is there any locking going on these queries based on in these objects? And it's joining to the DB index operational stats to say what's going on with these queries. Are there any queries that are being used at this given time? Okay. Is there another one? Oh, okay. One of the things you also have to be, this is an FYI, is anytime you do like a rebuild or an index rebuild, where's that done? One of the things that you will get throttled on, right, is the overuse of tempdb. Okay? Do you have access to tempdb physically? No. But it does use that behind the scenes. So yes, you have access to it programmatically. You can still create temp tables and things like that, right? You will get throttled if there's the overuse of tempdb, right? So if you do an alter index, what does alter index, where does the index rebuild happen? Tempdb, right? So if you've got a really large database and you do an alter index, you could overuse tempdb. I said could, right? So be sure that when you do an alter index, do that with online, rebuild with online equals on. That will heavily eliminate the possibility of you getting throttled. Okay? Just an FYI. Okay, let's keep going. We only got 5 minutes left. So here's another one. So we're going to basically index usage stats. So what's that one? This tells us what's currently being used. So let's look at that. And it's still running, right? So and this is true because this is actually a correct return results because that PowerShell script is calling a store procedures that actually does use these tables. So this is actual results being returned. So it's what's the index name? The last user seek. So you see 912, right? So these are actually being used right now. So you can actually say, hey, these indexes are being hit, okay? And how many times they're being hit. So user scans, user seeks. So this is critical information. What's going on with my, right? There's a user seek on some of these, right? Whoa, that's a lot. Or you can look at this and based on your database, you can say, okay, no, we need to address that, right? Make sense? So again, these are important index DMVs to look at. Go, what's going on with my indexes, and could they be affecting the performance of my query? Okay. All right. That was index DMOs. Okay, so I think we're about done. So I rushed through just to fit it in 60 minutes. I kind of rushed through real quick. But any questions about what we just saw? Any of the DMVs, any of the DMOs, about connection, throttling, things like that? Did this help? Yeah? Okay. Any questions about what you saw? Yes? Yeah, that won't give you you can do that. But I still think that happens. Yeah, that won't be. Well, but it depends on, but it's still done. I think it's still done in tempdb. I can't remember. I'll have to, can't remember. Yes? No extended events yet. Right, so no profiling, because that's what these use, right? But there's, and really why is that? So if you think about it, let me just be brutally honest. SQL Server Management Studio really uses what? I mean, it's based on SMO, right? So SQL Server, Windows Azure SQL Database really is has a subset of the SMO objects, and so until they're all there, you won't see some of these things, right? So so no extended events, no profiler. I saw another hand. No? All right. Yes. Well, so no, it's not a flag to say don't throttle, because you still could get throttled if if it uses too much. Because you have a in Windows Azure SQL Database, you have a tempDB usage limit, and I think it's 2 gig. I have to look that up, right? So if you go over that usage per database, then you will get throttle. Well, no, so it still doesn't tempDB, but basically it's saying, hey, yeah, do it in the local database, right? Yeah. All right, any other questions? All right, hope this helped. Thank you very much.